Thank you so much for joining us online today. We so appreciate you checking out this message. We hope you enjoy it and are inspired to live more and more like Jesus Christ by His grace. If you would like to support the ministries of Rancho, you can do so at rancho.tv/giving. Set up a giving profile and a reoccurring gift. We'd sure appreciate that. Enjoy.
All right, so today we're starting a brand new fall series called Happy. Isn't that pleasant? Doesn't that just make you happy looking at it? Alex is our graphic artist as well, and he comes up with all this stuff. And he might just ask AI, and maybe he just sits and does nothing but ask AI on this. But it's really just kind of fun, right? And it's a word that is very, very powerful. It is a simple word. It is a pleasant word. I mean, you can't say the word happy with a scowl on your face. It's an alluring word, an attractive word, and it is a universally sought out reality. We all want to be happy. We all want to be happy. If we're parents, pretty much all we want is our kids to be happy, right? We want the world to be happier. It's just this thing that is so simple, this word, this concept that's so simple and that we all want it, yet for a lot of us, it's just elusive or it's out of our grasp, or we experience this feeling for a while and then it retreats, and it's just this journey that sometimes seems harder than it should be. But I also want to recognize the fact that happiness and the pursuit of happiness is something that's fairly new in the history of humankind. From a sort of anthropological view, we've only had time to think about happiness for a couple thousand years. Because before that, we were doing this kind of stuff. We were trying to survive, right? Let's look at the Neanderthals, just trying to survive. You ain't got time to think about happiness. Every day you're waking up, what are we gonna hunt to eat today? What are we gonna gather to eat today? All you're doing is thrashing around every day for survival, either trying to eat something or not being eaten by something. That's your whole existence. And so again, from anthropological view, for hundreds of thousands of years, humankind has not had the time to think about happiness. But then we started farming, agrarianism sort of, popped up, and hey, we can actually grow our crops. We don't have to keep hunting for them. We can plant seeds and water and stuff like that, and we can relax and we can have a little more time. And we don't have to go hunting for animals. We can actually get them and breed them, and we can grow our own animals, and then we can gather as people in little clusters that we call towns and villages and cities, and then we don't have to consider that tribe over the mountain to be enemies and kill them every chance we get. We can actually call them friends and build, a trading environment. And so we can grow the crops and they can grow the animals and they can do the furs, and we can start being more civilized. And we don't have to work 18 hours a day. We can maybe only work, 10, 12 hours a day, and then 8 hours a day. And then we could take a day off. And then what happens with all this brain power? We can start thinking about what we're thinking about. And we can start thinking about what might be out there. And we can start thinking about the meaning of life. We can start thinking about what we're feeling and what we're thinking. And so the thinker started to emerge. And the thinker started to emerge roughly 3,000 years ago. In the East, ancient Mesopotamian texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh started talking about the notion of happiness or joy. That was just 3,000 years ago. Human beings started to think about what we're thinking about and started to think about what we're feeling. And then in the Old Testament wisdom literature, roughly 3,000 years ago, give or take, the concept of happiness starts to emerge. Proverbs 3:13 is an example. Happy is the one who finds wisdom and the one who gains understanding. We can start thinking about our happiness, right? We're living in cities, we have a little bit of time. What are we thinking about? What are we feeling? And maybe we can pursue this idea of feeling content or feeling at peace, feeling a sense of wonder that, hey, it's good to be alive. And then, of course, you have the Greek philosophers start to emerge. The famous ones, Socrates, started thinking of happiness as human flourishing, coming through virtue and wisdom. Then Plato comes along. Happiness is, as he called, the harmony of the soul, achieved through justice and philosophical understanding. Aristotle then comes along and he talks about happiness being the highest pursuit achieved through cultivating virtue and living a life of reason. So we can kind of think our way and reason our way into happiness and live a good, sound life, and we can feel what we want to feel. This is fairly new, just 2,500, 3,000 years old. And so now, happiness has become our individual and societal obsession. Happiness has become our individual and societal obsession. And that's totally understandable, and I would even say that's good. It's good to want to flourish. It's good to want to feel a sense of well-being, not just for ourselves, but for our family, and maybe not just for our family, but our community, right? Our neighbors. And then maybe the whole world can one day feel what we all long to feel, and that is happy. Happy. And just as a reminder, our entire nation was founded on the promise of happiness. You remember that from history class? Declaration of Independence. Let's all recite it together by memory. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our entire country founded on the notion that free people can be free to pursue happiness together. And even going back further than the Declaration of Independence, the very first word that Jesus used in his public ministry was the word happy. Happy. That word happy that Jesus used is makarios, and it means this: supremely blessed, a sense of well-being, flourishing, and a deeply content state. The very first word out of Jesus' mouth in his public ministry, Sermon on the Mount, in the province of Galilee, this beautiful hill overlooking this beautiful lake. We don't quite know how many people are there, at least dozens, probably hundreds. And he's delivering his very first public sermon, and the very first word he says is the word happy. And then he starts laying out what happiness looks like from a heaven point of view, from a Jesus-centered point of view, from a true human thriving point of view. And it's kind of different than what we consider to be happiness. Because what we consider to be happiness, if it's not aligned with the heart of God, who is our creator, and we're made in his image, so if our pursuit of happiness isn't aligned with his heart and his thinking, then that pursuit of happiness becomes very frustrating. And so to quote modern theologians, Sir Sly, here's the question of the day. Are we done yet? Are we having fun yet? What does happiness look like? I don't really know. Not a theologian, musician. And this is a pretty powerful song. Are we done yet? Asking young generations, are we having fun yet? What does happy look like? I don't really know. So here you have our country founded on happiness, and there's still this question about what does that look like and feel like it, and are we happy, and what does it look like? And then you have the very first word of Jesus in his public ministry saying happy, makarios. This is the invitation. So what kind of happiness are we pursuing, right? So to ask you this question, are you happy? Knowing what you know, experiencing what you experience, feeling what you feel, are you happy right here, right now as you sit? Just quietly answer that in your own head and your own heart. Am I happy? And then as the researchers would also ask, are you very happy? There's happy, which is good and content, but are you very happy? Are you very satisfied with your life? And then answering the question, why? Why are you happy? Or why are you very happy? Or why you can't answer yes to either of those, and you might have to admit, you know what? I'm not very happy, or I am unhappy. The why question really needs to be answered. And over the course of this series through the fall, we're going to answer the why question. Why are people feeling unhappy, and why are people feeling happy or very happy? And then we're going to look at that compared to the teaching of Jesus and the life of Jesus, and really strive to align our heart and head with him. Because happiness is the obsession of Western civilization, there's been a lot of study, a lot of research on happiness, and there's some not so good news about American happiness. We just dropped to 24th in the world in terms of the happiness ranking. 2 years ago, we were 15th. 2 years ago, we were the 15th happiest nation on earth. Keep in mind, the most prosperous and the most free nation on earth has plummeted from 15th to 24th in the happiness ranking. That's pretty shocking. And then you look at the details. Well, why are we increasingly less happy? And things start to kind of pop up generationally. So there's a generational divide that's massive. So if you are a baby boomer, And that is, a baby boomer is 3 minutes older than me. That's the definition, the scientific definition of a baby boomer. There's a happiness ranking of 37 points. It's not 37%, it's a whole kind of thing. I won't get into that, but the baby boomers' happiness ranking is 37. That's pretty good. Baby boomers are pretty happy. If we were all 37 in our happiness ranking, we'd be just fine. We wouldn't even do this series, but we're not. Millennials dropped to 28 in the happiness ranking. That's not great. It's not poor, but it's not good. Gen X, 28. Gen Z, 27. The younger generations are not very happy. And if you were to ask, whether it's a sociologist or psychologist, is there a problem in America in terms of happiness and well-being and contentment? They would all tell you, yes, there is in the younger generations. There's a bit of a hope that has a chance of rising and maybe will rise as they get older and maybe work on their stuff and work on priorities and work on ways of thinking and ways of managing, the world around them. So there's hope there that this can rise. But I think the hope of happiness that we're going to talk about is a hope that is aligning our heads and our hearts and our values and priorities and life and lifestyle with that of Jesus. All of this can rise, not just for the young, but for all of us, and not just for Americans, but the whole world. So as these researchers are asking people, well, are you happy? And why are you happy? 4 things pop up as priorities for happiness in America. And they're pretty obvious. One is a thriving family. If you have a thriving family, you're probably going to say, I'm happy. Even if other stuff is going sideways, there's nothing that could beat a thriving family for well-being. Second is a well-connected person socially. If you have friends and you have family, you're happy. Just period. It's just the way it goes. That's why we spend so much time on groups, right? So we're not connecting just around lightweight acquaintances, but we're connecting as friends. As we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the connecting as friends in church is, I think, among the most powerful connections we can make. So being well-connected socially is the key to happiness. Having a satisfying vocation, and that vocation is your voice or your life calling, right? What is your voice? It could be your job. It could be what you're passionate about. You're volunteering, raising a family. What is your vocation? If you have a satisfying vocation, your happiness rises. And then favorable circumstances. If your life is going well, you're happier. Now that might be counterintuitive to a sermon because I've heard a ton of sermons that say, hey, you can't buy happiness or happiness isn't related to what you have or your wealth. That's just not entirely true. If you talk to people about happiness, people who don't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from are a little bit happier than those who are food secure or housing secure. Our possessions do have some bearing on our happiness. These are the 4 keys to the happiness survey. And here's what I want you to know about all 4. These can change. Every one of them. These can change. A lot of what we do here at church is we, come alongside families that might have been good families, healthy families, thriving families, and something happened. Some betrayal, some disconnect, some argument, some secret was exposed, right? And now that family that you thought was thriving is now struggling. This can change. Friendships can change. People can move. There could be a disconnect in friendships, and that goes sideways, right? That can change. A satisfying vocation can change. You can get fired from a satisfying job. You can have certain relationships and certain things in your life where your vocation is not what it was. And then your favorable circumstances can turn unfavorable just like that. Whether it is your provisions, your possession, your health, the stressors in your life, everything that could change, everything that we're pursuing that we think makes us happy is mutable. It can change. And so if something goes sideways, our happiness just turns right around. So what we're going to do is pursue, in a Jesus-centered way, happiness that never changes. Happiness that is a rock under our feet, that even when the winds blow, as Jesus also says in the Sermon on the Mount, and the rains come, we are steady. And we are steady in who God says we are. We're steady in God's promises. We're steady in knowing who we are. We're steady through difficult times. We're just steady. We're peaceful and we're content even when things around us change. So while that list is important, And I'll be straight up, I want that list. There's no problem wanting that list. There is a deeper sense of happiness that we will be pursuing right alongside Jesus in these coming weeks. When Jesus came to us 2,000 years ago, he came to a world that was very unhappy. He came to a people that was very unhappy. The Jewish people were incredibly unhappy because their circumstances were terrible. The Roman Empire that they called the Great Beast, every time you read about a great beast in the New Testament, it's the Roman Empire, right? So the Roman Empire had come and invaded the people of Israel. They oppressed violently the people of Israel. They repressed them with threats. They oppressed them with injustices. They repressed them in violence of unimaginable scale, including mass crucifixions. They're temple leaders, and these are the temple leaders that were supposed to be advocating for the people. They ended up making a deal with the great beast of the Roman Empire, and they were paid by the Roman Empire, and they were given privileges by the Roman Empire to keep their own people oppressed. They were being taxed to permanent and generational poverty. They were not happy. They were living in darkness. And so living in darkness, all of them, Jesus comes in and gives them this little glimmer of hope. Now, little glimmer of hope is found kind of buried in the Old Testament. And when I say buried in the Old Testament, here's what I mean. The Old Testament is full of unhappiness. The Old Testament is full of injustice. The whole Old Testament is full of this tension between God's promises that light is coming, but their experience of darkness. And so to introduce Jesus, a concept from the Old Testament was placed right in the coming of Christ. And here's what it says. The people living in darkness have seen a great light. That's the introduction to Jesus. People living in darkness, the Jewish people living in darkness, the whole world living in darkness have now seen a great light. This is Jesus. This is Jesus. A great light is here. It's not later. A great light is here even when things around us are not working. A great light is here for our betterment, not just grinding out light begrudgingly or just looking forward to heaven at some point, but we can live a life of great light right here and right now. To put it this way, we can be happy right here and right now. We can live in this great light right here and right now, even when things around us aren't going so well. And so instead of pursuing these four things that the data says makes us happy or unhappy, we're going to be pursuing the heart of Christ and the teaching of Christ and the life of Christ and walk with him towards this great light. And here's how it all starts. Not in Matthew 4, but in Matthew 3. In Matthew 3, there's this preacher who's baptizing. He's this very eccentric guy. Probably maybe homeless, probably, smelling a certain way. The Bible's very descriptive about what he wears and how he carries himself. And he is shouting in the wilderness that there is something coming. This great light is coming, right? Prepare yourself. And then he's baptizing people in the Jordan River, right? Well, what is this all about? Matthew 3:13. Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to be baptized by John. But John tried to deter him, saying, I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me? John's preparing the way for the Savior. He's preparing the way for a great light. And here comes Jesus, who he knows is the great light. He's preparing the way for Jesus. Jesus comes to him, and Jesus says, I need you to baptize me. So you can imagine the tension here. What is baptism? Baptism of John is not exactly like the baptism of the temple. In the temple, there was a form of baptism. It's called washing ceremonies and basins and how the water drips, and it was all very ceremonial. And some people think the baptism that John was doing in the wilderness is similar to the washing of the temple. I don't think so. I actually don't agree with that. It's maybe a nod, but it's something entirely different. John is not doing a cleansing ceremony for the temple that had reasons behind it. John was doing something entirely new and entirely foreign even to the Old Testament. Something brand new, and that is taking people in the Jordan River and immersing them and bringing them up. Brand new. Where did that even come from? Nobody really has a good idea. Brand new, shouting to the world around him, something new is here. And for something new to be here, the old has got to be washed away. So one of the symbols of baptism is the old is washed away. Sometimes we joke in the baptism, if you're a super sinner, you're going to stay up there a very long time. And super sinner is a joke. We don't use those terms, but just for fun, right? So, but the whole idea is that baptism is something needs to be cleansed here, right? It needs to be cleansed. The old isn't working. The old's got to die. That's the other symbol of baptism. It's not just cleansing, but it's death. You know, when you're under the water, you're not breathing, right? It's a symbol of death. It's a symbol of cleansing, so that a new light would arise, so that something clean would arise, that something, better would arise, going from darkness to light. And so basically the baptism that John was performing was a baptism of dying to the old and cleansing the old. So Jesus comes to John and says, hey, I need you to baptize me. And John's thinking, you have no darkness in you. There's no sin in you. There's no guile in you. There's nothing about you that needs to be cleansed. And there's nothing about you that needs to die. And there's nothing about you that is dark that needs to be risen back to light. So what's going on? John is totally confused. And then Jesus said to him in verse 15, well, let it be so now. It is proper for us to do this to fulfill all righteousness. Basically, Jesus says to John, you're just going to do it. And John says, okay. There's no real explanation here. Jesus says it's just the right thing to do. We're going to fulfill righteousness. I don't know what that means, all right, but I'm going to do it because you're the boss and I'm not. Baptizes Jesus. Here's what I think is going on. Keep in mind that Jesus is about coming to us and being with us. Jesus is not just the voice of God from heaven shouting down. He is the life of God and the breath of God and the Spirit of God and the nature of God among us, with us. And part of that journey is God saying, my son is going to take on the darkness of the world. My son is going to take on the evil of the world, the violence of the world. My son is going to take on even the great beasts of the world, right? He's going to walk the road that we walk. He's going to bear the consequence of our sin. He is going to take that upon himself. And so when Jesus says, I need to be baptized, it was not for his sake, but for our sake. Jesus is walking with us. When he says, John, you're going to baptize me, Jesus is being baptized on our behalf. It's as though the entire world and all of us are with Jesus and in Jesus as he is being baptized. And as he is risen from the waters, it is us rising with Christ to a brand new life, cleansing from the old, dying from the old, to a whole new way of light. That's Jesus. I want to put it this way. It's as though Jesus is saying to us, I am walking with you in your darkness so you can walk with me into a great light. Jesus is being baptized for us all. And so as Jesus steps into the water, and as he goes under the water, he's bearing the darkness of the world upon himself as he's going under the water. So Jesus was baptized in water at the beginning of his ministry, and he's baptized in blood at the end of his ministry on the cross, because he's bearing our burdens. He's bearing our sin. He's bearing our violence upon himself. And as Jesus is risen from the water, he is rising with us, alongside of him, taking us to a whole new future where we're cleansed from the old, and the old has died, and we're risen to a brand new life. We're risen to the kingdom of heaven. We're rising to this great light that Jesus promises us all. And here's what happened after the baptism of Jesus, Matthew 3:16. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he came up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and resting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son, whom I love. I am well pleased with him." Now, if you were raised in church or heard a bunch of sermons, heard teaching through Matthew, you've no doubt heard this story. Maybe you've seen this imagery in so many ways, stained glass, art throughout the centuries of Jesus coming out of the baptism water, a dove descending on him, light descending on him, and a voice saying, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." So here's what happened to Jesus at his baptism. Jesus had heaven open to him. Jesus had the Spirit of God rest on him. Jesus had the voice of God saying, "This is my son." Jesus had the care of God saying, "Whom I love." And Jesus was the pleasure of God. "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased." That is Jesus. That's what happened at his baptism. To put it this way, this is the story of Jesus. This is the story of Jesus. And so we can look back at Matthew 3 and go, yeah, that's what happened to Jesus. But understand that Jesus came to bear our darkness and bring us a great light. So this is not only the story of Jesus, this is the story of us. This is the story of us. Oh, did you see what happened there? Let's go back. This is not just the story of Jesus, this is the story of us. The gospel, the good news, is that whatever happens to Jesus is our story. Whatever rights and privileges belong to Jesus also belong to us. So the story of Jesus is also the story of us. So get this. The baptism of Jesus is not just about Jesus. It's about us. That means you have heaven open to you just as Jesus did. That means you have the Spirit of God resting on you just as Jesus did. That means you have the voice of God saying, "You are my child," just as the voice of God came to Jesus. You have the care of God saying, "You are whom I loved," just as Jesus heard from the Father, "This is my son whom I love," and you are the pleasure of God. God looks upon you and says, "You are my pleasure," just as he said that to Jesus. The story of Jesus in Matthew 3 is the story of us. Heaven is open to you. The Spirit of God rests on you. And the voice of God says, "You are my child in whom I am well pleased." And I am telling you that is the foundation under our feet that cannot be changed, that cannot be moved, and that can bring happiness. And I mean the deepest, most profound happiness, the deepest sense of contentment, the deepest sense of belonging, the deepest sense of affirmation coming from the voice of God on Jesus also comes to us. And you might say to yourself, well, how do you get that? How do you get that every privilege that belongs to Jesus at his baptism belongs to us as a gift? Well, because we see that in one of our favorite verses of all time, in Ephesians chapter 1, a fan favorite verse. As I read this verse, I want you to see if the voice to you is the same as the voice to Jesus at his baptism. "This is my beloved child in whom I am well pleased." Let's look at Matthew 1, verse 4. "God loved us and chose us in Christ to be holy and without fault in his eyes. God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family." Does that sound familiar? You are in the family of God. He is your father. You are a child of God. The voice that went to Jesus is the voice that goes to you. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great, what? Pleasure. You are the pleasure of God. As the voice came to Jesus, "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased," the voice comes to you in the exact same way. You are my beloved daughter. You are my beloved son. And it is my pleasure to give that gift to you. That is God's heart to you. And those words should make us happy. There's about a few dozen of you that aren't smiling at that right now. This is amazing. This is gospel. This is good news. I am a child of God. It's a gift he's given me. I am the pleasure of God. It's what he declares over my life. And I know for those of you who've been told time and time again, you're a sinner separated from God, or your sin separates you from God, or your sin deserves the condemnation or wrath of God. You heard these things over and over and over again, thousands of times. Your identity is not a happy identity. I have to please God. I have to obey God. I have to serve God. I have to make him happy so that he can maybe unlock a blessing. I mean, we've been raised in oppression. And it's time to live free, because the old message has to be washed away. The old message of condemnation has to be washed away. The old message that you're separated from God has to be washed away. The old message that this is what you have to do to kind of make yourself right, do the right things, believe the right way, go to church, do all the expectations of the religious leaders in order to make God happy with you, that has to die. There has to be a baptism. The old has to die. The old has to be washed away, and a new life has to emerge. And that new life declares over you, you are a child of God, and he is pleased. And that can never change. Whether our family is thriving or not, our identity is exactly the same. a declared perfect child of God, and he is happy with us. Our friendships can change, our vocation could change, our life circumstances could change, all the things that we strive for can change, but what cannot change is the voice of God over Jesus and the voice of God over you. You're a child of God, and he is happy with you. And all of that was immediately tested in Matthew chapter 4, where the Spirit of God takes Jesus into the wilderness. This is Matthew 4, verse 1, and we'll start with this next week. Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted there by the devil. So this happiness that was declared over Jesus is immediately tested in the wilderness. And we're going to walk with him there starting next week. Speaking of the devil, Evan. It's just a phrase. It's just a phrase. We say that for fun.
Yeah. No one ever has said that to me before, but it's fine.
It's fine. Hey, so you brought the song to us, and it's a really great song to close out this service and to introduce us to the next series. And why did you come up with this song?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't either, but it's happy.
This is a song that I guess when I first moved to California, this song came out. And it's just a lot of fun, and everybody shied away. There's a rap in the middle of the song, and everybody shied away. They did a version without the rap,
and that's what caught on.
Everybody shied away from that, and I was like, "You got to do the rap."
Are you doing the rap?
Of course, I'm doing the rap.
So here's a lingering question about whether white people can rap or not. The answer is
no.
So we'll find that out. There's a couple good ones out there. I can't share their names.
Yeah, it's okay.
That's okay. But you're going to give it your best, and we're going to love it.
Yeah.
It really is.
The whole song is just that, my whole theme of life is hope.
Yeah.
I love this idea of hope, just simply for the fact of what this song is talking about, living into that life that's modeled by Jesus and following these guidelines to live a life that brings out the fullness. I want the full experience of life. And this song is that. It's living into this Christ-like life and having the full experience of this happy life.
Yep, that's what this series is all about, as we follow Jesus in that. And I love that line, see the sun bursting through the clouds. So that's what this is all about. If you weren't able to say earlier, I am happy, see the sun bursting through the clouds, right? And we will get there together. Yeah. All right, let's all stand and enjoy. You're going to have to maybe clap and move and, stuff like that that's not allowed in church.
Life is for living with you. Make my decision. am I living in? Do I live in it? So astounded. If love is an ocean, you could drown me. The sweet embrace, the lovely taste I taste and see. I'm under grace, the place to be. Means I never need an umbrella. I'm cool in the cold and the hot weather. I'll never ever understand. I'm a man in the hands of great plans. I stand with faith in a life I never known to trust. Still inside my clutch, but like what's the dream of? What's the hope in? What's to die for? Live to no end. This is living. This life I've been given to gift. If I'ma live it, I'ma live it to death. So what's the dream of? What's the hope in? What's to die for? Live to no end. This is living. This life I've been given to gift. If I'ma live it, I'ma live it to death. Well, this is really
That was awesome, man. That was really good. Evan Rudisill, ladies and gentlemen. Nice job, nice job.